Hey everyone, Phobos here, coming out with another build guide, and this time it's for the Pact Berserker build. And there's a lot to go over with this build, so I think the best place to start would probably be the links, and then I'll explain a bit about what Pact does, and you can kind of see the rationale for some of the gear choices I made and the way I went in the tree. So, increased area effect / conk, control destruction, Dark Pact, faster casting, void manipulation, and then this would be increased critical strikes, and obviously we're socketed in a Pledge of Hands, which gives an implicit 30% or level 30 spell echo. So a bit about what Dark Pact does. Dark Pact basically damages yourself. It's a hit chaos skill, so it's one of the first chaos skills that is doing hits instead of a damage over time effect. And it's basically kind of like Ice Nova or something like that, except it doesn't freeze, it's all chaos damage, and it just emanates out from your character. You can see right here, this is with increased AoE, and this is with Conk Effectin. You can see it damages your health quite substantially. But yeah, and it deals damage based on your health, because it takes 6% of your health per cast, and then it uses that damage and combined with the amount of base damage to damage the enemy mobs around it. Now when you self-cast, you get a bonus. If you look at, it says 90% more damage with hits and ailments if using your life. So we're getting that effect here, and then you get +4 to radius if using your life. So you can use it with skeletons and stuff like that, but this guide isn't really going to be focused around that. It's going to be focused around self-cast. So I think the first thing we should get into is the why Combs and why Pledge of Hands, right? Well, Combs is obviously great for a lot of builds that can either don't need a 5 or a 6 link, or you can get a pseudo 5 link for the build using an essence craft, or you can use some type of two-handed weapon, right? Like a staff or maybe like an axe or something like that, and you don't need to have two different types of skills, like one to do your single target, one to do your AoE. So in this case, Dark Pact fulfills the requirement of it's basically our single target and our AoE, because we just swap in Conk Effect. And we can use a staff, and the staff is actually pretty good. So that's why we use Combs, and Combs not only gives us a ton of health, but because we get more health, we're able to scale our damage with that health. So Combs is giving us damage as well, so it's kind of just like a win-win. And then Pledge of Hands is just a really good staff for quite a few reasons. So one of the great things about Dark Pact is because it's chaos damage, you're going to be doing a lot more damage to mobs that are elemental resist, right? Because it's basically like bypassing elemental resist completely. And mobs have less chaos damage in general, or chaos resist in general, than elemental resist. So that's really good. But on top of that, there's not really many auras you can use to scale Dark Pact, which would be a problem if it did bad damage, but it doesn't do bad damage at all. It does actually incredible damage. So this is actually really good because it lets us basically use our mana pool for whatever we want. And in this case, I'm deciding to use it for Mind Over Matter. Now, using it for Mind Over Matter in this case is particularly great because if you look at the Berserker, the synergy with the Berserker here, Pain Reaver leeches to your life as well as your mana. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't leech to your mana quite as fast, but it's still pretty much incredible to use with Mind Over Matter because we can reserve all this, and we don't even need a large amount of mana regen, and we still have a very effective secondary mitigation source here of mana, because as we're hitting things, not only is our life leeching back instantly, but our mana is popping up very fast. So it's very easy to keep your mana full, which is an issue that a lot of Mind Over Matter builds struggle with. Some of them need to use Flasks and stuff like that, mana flasks. This build has no such issues. So it's quite great. So keep in mind, we're using Mind Over Matter, we're using a Combs, and then the Pledge of Hands also buffs our Mind Over Matter because we have 100% increased maximum mana, which is pretty insane. So there's a lot of synergy going on here. You can see there's the Combs, which is giving you more life. The Combs is also giving you more damage. The Combs is kind of forcing us to use a staff, but in this case, you would think of it as it's not really forcing us, where the staff is good anyways, and because we're using a staff, we're able to use the Combs. We have a 30 spell echo socketed in the weapon, which is incredible because the skill is a hit-based skill, so Echo works with it, and it allows it to do an insane amount of damage because Spell Echo is just great for spells. It's like the multi-strike of spells, right? The 152% spell damage is very strong, and the 100% increased max mana just synergizes insanely with our Mind Over Matter nodes here. If you look at the tree, okay, and you look at my gear, there's virtually like no mana on like any of this gear. Okay, so all of this mana right here comes from the staff and Mind Over Matter plus Inspiration. Now, if you had really optimized gear, if you had GG rings, you would have even more mana, and you're going to have more health when you hit max levels. That's kind of important. Keep in mind this character is only 86, so it's going to gain more health and mana per level. The health is going to scale harder because we have a lot more percentage increase. But yeah, so the mana could probably easily get to like 3 point something K, and the health can get around like 9K fairly easily depending on the way you build it. So you just have an insane life pool with this build, as well as a ton of damage because we're scaling damage up your health to some degree. And then since it's a hit-based chaos skill, we can also scale with crit. And that's what I did with this build, as well as Aspect of Carnage is a more, which is just great in general. But the crit is really what throws it off the top. And crit with staffs, as it turns out, is pretty damn good because not only can you just get all the normal great crit nodes from the tree, you get Arcane Potency, and you get Annihilation, Doomcast, Assassination. All these are like the standard crit nodes, right? Throat Seeker. These are all really great for crit builds. But on top of that, you can get this awesome node, Serpent Stance, which gives like 35 multi and 40 crit with 2 leading 20 crit nodes into it for 3 points. It's absolutely insane. It allows us to get crit on our jewels if we want, crit multi on our jewels for spells, or just so there's just so many options, so many ways to scale this, and that's why Dark Pact is such an insane skill because it's chaos hit. So you can scale it with all the things that scale on hit, and yeah, it's just you can build it so many different ways. It's a really fun skill to play around with. So let's take a look at the tree, I guess, a bit, and then we'll go back to the gear because I'm going to talk about some alternative gear choices later. So the tree, I basically leveled this guy asunder, and then once I got Dark Pact at 28, I just played Dark Pact. Now, if you're going to level as Dark Pact, just a little aside here, you're probably going to want to invest in some health gear because you're going to be damaging yourself quite substantially. So what you don't want to happen is you don't want to be on like Kitava with 1500 health and then be spamming out most of your health and then get hit with like one ability and die instantly. So you have to be cognizant of the fact that you're spending health to use the skill if you want to level with it, and you want to always have your health substantially over the zone. And you don't obviously want to rush Vault Pact, not that you really can anyways based on where you start, but you want to get some of these like regen nodes. Like the only one you really have to get, I guess, is this because the other ones just come passively, right here and this node right here and this node right here. So you actually do get a fair amount of regen, which is pretty nice, and you can run like a stone golem before you swap to the actual damage-oriented golems once you're in late game, but just to give you a bit more HP regen. But yeah, the build performs like really well. You just have to be kind of careful on bosses, because on bosses your leech is not going to sustain you until you get very high damage values. Like for me, it didn't sustain me until I had the Aspect of Carnage, and I had like most of my crit nodes, and I really started to crit with the skill. Before that, I just couldn't sustain the damage. So you have to be careful with that, but it works really well on trash, and obviously if you're leveling with it, you want to take Pain Reaver before you start using it, because otherwise you have no leech. So there's that. But in terms of the general tree, I'll put this back down. You basically just get a ton of health from the Marauder side, right? You get whatever jewels make sense to get. You get the area here. Come over here to get the crit in the area and the staff nodes. Get Mind Over Matter. Again, more crit, more health. Jewel, more area. Heart and Soul. Throat Seeker, more crit, more health, more crit, more health, and then obviously Vault Pact. Now this character's level 86. We have all of our points from the story, where would we progress next? As you can see, I'm heading up towards atrophy. And then that's going to take us to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that'd be level 90. And then you could do 91, 92, 93, 94, or something like that. Or you can take more jewels. You can come down here and get more health this way or this way. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I definitely take this cluster. It's really strong. And then after that, you could probably arguably get more benefit from jewels. Like you could take this and then get this jewel, and this jewel. And or at least this jewel and this jewel, because they're only 2 points each, and you'll get a substantial amount of health. You can get like 7 health, and you can scale with so many different things. You can do area, chaos damage, crit multi. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff available to you on jewels you can pair with that health roll. So that would be the way I would finish off this build. Now let's get into a couple of the choices that I make the character actually before we get into the gear, and we'll go over like some of the skills and stuff that you use. So obviously Wither Totem is our bread and butter. Wither Totem just gives you like more chaos damage on the target. It basically just keeps stacking damage and it continues to ramp up. It can stack up to 20 times. You're probably not going to get it there in most cases, but it just adds an obscene amount of damage. So you always want to use a Wither Totem with any type of chaos build. Now I have Assassin's Mark here. I have Assassin's Mark on Self-Cast, you'll notice. You can put it on Blasphemy, but if you put it on Blasphemy, you don't get to run Clear Mind, and it's not really only that, but you're taking away from a lot of your Mind over Matter effective health pool, right? Because Assassin's Mark on Blasphemy is like 35% of this, which is non-trivial. So you can obviously run it on Blasphemy though, but the reason why I have it on this is because I have it linked to Arcane Surge. So when you cast it, you automatically get Arcane Surge because it has the exact, pretty much or close to the exact amount of mana required to trigger Arcane Surge. So as you can see, it just always keeps it up. It's a very quick cast, and it also gives you power charges when you kill the targets, as well as this is pretty much the only curse that's going to affect Dark Pact in a damage-oriented sense, right? So the idea is that you can probably curse like every 3 to 4 packs. Like you don't need to curse every pact, obviously. That'll be enough to keep Arcane Surge up and keep your 3 power charges up. I don't really invest in more charges, although you can. It's not terrible to get this charge right here, for example. This charge is a little out of the way, though. With the nerf to the charges, I'd say they're even like less worth getting. On a lot of builds, it was sort of borderline before, but now it's kind of even worse, unless you're doing voids or something like that. But obviously, if you get instability, then you can get the node behind it, which is a fairly decent amount of spell damage, and you're getting a little bit of charge duration. So it's kind of just, it depends on like your utility, right? So if you're contrasting utility versus raw damage, so you can make the choice there. But I normally just play with the default power charges. So for the golem, move on a bit. We use flame golem. You can also, the better golem to use is lightning golem. But I just have so much cast speed right now, and like I said, I was kind of at that point earlier where I was doing too much damage to myself for my own good, so that's why I have a Flame Golem in. And Dark Pact is here. And then I have Blood Rage. Blood Rage is to get Frenzy charges. You don't need to use this if you feel like it's too sketch. There are people that use stuff like Poacher's Mark on Blasphemy, but again, you're eating into your mana pool. So it kind of depends on what you want to do there. But Blood Rage, in my opinion, is pretty safe like 99% of the time. There's not really, you don't even really notice it except in certain situations, and you just kind of want to play carefully, right? So there might be like some maps where I wouldn't run this, and it's just kind of up to you to know when to apply that discretion. I would say it's not a bad thing to use overall. If we're talking about like really late game, I think it's the Emerald Dream is the jewel, and that can basically replace Blood Rage and do the same thing. You have to have it on. But Blood Rage isn't really bad because you normally turn it on at the start of the map and then you don't think about it again because it refreshes when you kill something. So I find it very useful. Very easy way to get Frenzy and power charges. And if you want, you can have an Orb of Storms to keep your charges up single target. But again, like I said, this build isn't really like dependent on having the charges. So it's not the biggest deal in the world if they fall off. It's more like a bit of extra damage. Now let's get into the Flasks a bit, right? So we have 2 health Flasks. Now I have the Eternals in this case because I want kind of, especially with running Blood Rage, you can see if I turn on Blood Rage here, I start to dip into my health a bit, and then I pop one of these, and we're going up at a steady pace, but it doesn't go up so fast where it turns the Flask effect off. So that's why I like using Eternals here. And yeah, I have a curse resist or a curse immune one, a bleeding one. I have a movement speed Quicksilver. Now you're gonna need this if you're not using a movement skill. The only movement skill you can really use with a staff is Leap Slam, and unfortunately the base attack speed on the Pledger Hands is 1.25, which isn't the greatest. So yeah, that's why I just opt to use Quicksilver. It's not like the greatest clear speed. E-Tup's build probably has faster clear because it's using Shield Charge, but this build has an insane amount of damage for a pretty good amount of effective health. So, and obviously this Flask kind of is good enough for me. Now, use a Diamond Flask as a crit build. Pretty common sense there. The Flask that's going to really stand out is the Azuri's Promise, and you pretty much only use this when you're at the damage levels where your leech is not sustaining you, because as you can see, it adds 2% of chaos damage leads to his life. So the only reason why you're pretty much using this is for that, because you don't gain any benefit from the 15% of Fizz or the 10% of Elemental converting to chaos, because you're not doing any elemental or physical damage. You're doing all chaos already. So yeah, you pretty much use this for the chaos damage on single target, because there's going to be a point where you're going to just do too much damage on yourself, even when you're doing massive amounts of Conk Effect and you're leeching with Vaal Pact. So you just pop this and you go to town, and it's pretty good. But then eventually you want to replace it. You can replace it with a bunch of different things. You can either do like a granite, which is what I was thinking of. You can put a Roomies in there. You can also replace one of these with a granite and have a granite and a Roomies. That's a good defensive option. And yeah, it's pretty much it about the Flasks. Now let me bring up the gear, because this is where... So obviously we've talked about the combs, we've talked about the Pledger Hands. Now the rest of the gear is pretty much just miscellaneous shit. You want to get crit multi, like cast speed where you can, or spell damage. This is kind of like all budget other pieces in the sense that I needed the resistances really bad, so I don't have anything too fancy. But there are a couple things you can do here to increase your damage, right? So the Repentance Gloves are actually insane for this build if you're running an Astral Menace. It's more just a matter of the fact that you're losing health rolls, but that's not super significant because you're probably going to be around 8 to 9k health when this is like a 92 or something like that, especially if you get some good jewels. So the health loss isn't like super substantial. It's more just about the fact that you're losing resistances. And if you can do without the resistances, like if you have a really GG belt that's like 40s across the board and 40 across the board boots, and then 40 across the board helm, and then you have some like insane rings where you have like 40 resists on, like just tons of resists on your rings, then you can afford to run an Astral Menace and their Repentance Gloves, and it's insane because you basically have like around 400 and some strength at that point, especially if you're getting strength on your gear and stuff like that. That would be the ideal circumstances. You're getting strength rolls on your gear with like 2 tier 1 or tier 2 resists, right? So strength roll here, tier 1, strength roll here, tier 1, strength roll on the rings, and then strength roll on the belt, and the resists are all like tier 1 or tier 2, so you're able to compensate for not having as many and giving up that suffix for the strength. And if you can do that, and you run the Repentance Gloves, the damage goes up just by an insane amount, because you're adding a, what is it called actually? You're adding the thing where it's like spell damage. You're gaining spell damage from strength, basically. It's not Iron Grip. It's the other one. But you understand what I mean. So you're just gaining a ton of damage there. And, yeah, so that's like a way to get it for really endgame, but the damage is already fine at this point, so not too much to worry about, especially when the wither stacks are up and Conk Effect is in. And yeah, I think we already mentioned crit would be in here, and I don't think there's too much else in terms of other ways you can do this. But yeah, this is kind of like the budget option until you get the GG gear. But you're probably gonna, it's just hard to get stuff like that. And obviously, you don't have to use the Clear Mind, but it helps a lot, gives you a lot of damage, keeps your mana pool unreserved, which is nice, so I like it. And, oh, the Ascendancy, right? That's what we should bring up. We already talked about that a little, but the last place you want to go is Cloaked in Savagery. This build doesn't have it because, unfortunately, the character ripped to a DD totem and is currently in Standard. And, I don't have Uber Lab unlocked in Standard, and I unlocked it in Harbinger the night before I ripped, and then I got up in the morning, decided to do a couple maps, and ripped to a DD totem. So yeah, we'd obviously take Cloaked in Savagery, and this would make things a lot less sketch in general, because whenever you get hit for a Savage hit, which isn't even that much of a, like the threshold to get hit that much isn't even that much, you just get 100% of your damage leached as life, and you are pretty much an unstoppable juggernaut. So pretty insane. Oh, Pantheon, we can do Pantheon. So that's not Pantheon. Pantheon, basically, Soul of the Brine King. This is probably the best one. You want to capture the essence for the Champion of the Frost so that you get the Cannot Be Frozen to complement the Cannot Be Stunned if you've been stunned or frozen recently. And then the Minor God Power, I normally take this one. It's not that this is like insane, but all the other minors are pretty much dog shit for this build, so this is probably the best one to take. Yeah, by far I would say. So there's the God Powers, and yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I'll put a Path of Building link in the description so you can see kind of everything about the build, but it does insane damage. I think when you're actually level 90 something, like 94 or something, the build does like 760k to Shaper. That's with like 5 or 10 stacks of Wither or something like that. I forget exactly how many. And your curse up, but your curse doesn't do much to Shaper, so it's actually not super important in that fight. And that's with Confectant, obviously, and a 6 link. So it does insane damage, and insane leech, insane area. It's just a really good skill overall. Not the fastest clearing skill, but definitely super fun. And hope you guys liked the guide. Maybe you learned something for it. You want to do your own Dark Pack build. There's a bunch of different ways you can build a skill. You don't need a combs. You don't even need a combs for this version. You can use like a belly as a budget option. You don't even have to use something like that. You can use a carcass if you want. The build will still be effective. It'll just be, you know, slightly less tanky. Obviously, you guys probably seen Etup is using the carcass with the one hand and the shield. I think it's like non-crit. That build's great too. It's obviously less damage, but it's still great because he has 10k health and he reserves his mana for the Poacher's Mark and the Assassin's Mark, but a lot of different ways you can build it. This is just my take on it, and hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions at all, just feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try and get back to them as soon as I can. And it's on to the next build, which I think is going to be Bladefall. So stay tuned for that, and see you guys later.